All right, so again, there's lots of different types of factorings, but no matter what, if you're going to be solving by factoring, the first thing you want to do is make sure that it is equal to 0. So for number 1, is this currently equal to 0? Cool, all right, so good to go. If not, you got to make it equal to 0, but we're good to go so far, okay? Once it's equal to 0, the first step of factoring, of all factoring, is to take out the GCD. Okay. So a reminder, the GCD is the biggest thing that you can divide all of the terms by. So what's the biggest thing I can divide 5, 15, and 20 by? 5. Good. So the biggest number I can divide all the terms by is 5. So that would be my GCD. The other thing you should check for is variables. How many terms are there here? Okay, 3 terms. Is there a variable in common in all of them? No. Okay, so if there was, you would need to include that in the GCD as well, but in this case, no. Okay, so the GCD is just 5. So now we're going to go ahead and divide by the GCD of 5. So just divide everything by that GCD. So if I do that, I just divide every term by 5. So 5r squared divide 5 would be 1r squared. Plus 15r divide 5 would be 3r. Minus 20 divide 5 would be minus 4. Now, if you had your flow chart, the next step would be to determine the type of factoring. How many terms are there? 3 terms. So on the flow chart, there is a method of factoring that we use for 3 terms, and that's that ACB table number puzzle method. Okay. So for this 3-term method, the first step is to identify your A, B, and C values. And then you're going to set up that number puzzle. So in the top left corner, we're going to calculate A times C. So what would my A times C be in this case? Say again? Yeah, A times C would be 1 times -4, so that would make -4. In the top right corner, I put my B value. So my B value is 3. Now, if you recall from before the break, this is like a number puzzle, right? The puzzle here is to find 2 numbers that multiply to make -4. So multiply to make this number, and also add to make that number. So I need to find 2 numbers that multiply to make -4 and add to make 3. What you got? Very good. Yeah, 4 and -1. So if you take 4 and -1, those 2 numbers multiply to make -4. And if you were to add them together, 4 plus -1, you would get 3. So that is the solution to this number puzzle. So next, you're going to make 2 sets of parentheses. So make 2 sets of parentheses. You're going to put a variable in each one. So in this case, it'll be r and r, or x and x. If you want to just use x all the time, that's fine with me. And then the number puzzle solutions, 4 and -1, are going to go inside. So +4 and -1 will go inside. Now, the next step is the step that is most commonly forgotten. Does anybody remember what the next step is? Good, the A value, to divide by the A value. This one's forgotten the most. So my A value is 1. So I divide each of these by the A value of 1. Now, in this case, dividing by 1 won't change anything. So what's 4 divide 1? Still just 4. So this is just going to stay r plus 4. And then 1 divide 1 is still 1. So this is just going to stay r minus 1. Now, in this case, it didn't do anything. But if the A value was like a 2 or a 3, it could very well change things. So always make sure you divide by A. Now, the last step of factoring is to put the GCD in front. So I'm going to put my GCD in front, and these are called our factors. So these are called our factors. Now, in this case, it wants us to find the factors, but it also wants us to solve. So does anybody remember what you do with factors to get solutions? Okay, so once you have the factors to get solutions, you then just take each of them, take each factor, and you set them each equal to 0. So if I set the last one here, if I set r minus 1 equal to 0 and solved for r, I would just add the 1 over, and so r is equal to 1. So this is one of our solutions. If I set this middle one here, r plus 4 equal to 0, so solve for r by subtracting the 4 over, r would equal negative 4. So that's another solution. The last factor is a 5, but if I set 5 equal to 0, not only is that nonsense, there's also no r to solve at all, so that one doesn't produce a solution. So the solutions are negative 4 and 1. These are the answers to this question. Okay, so the answers to this question are going to be the negative 4 and the 1. All right. I'm guessing by y'all's feedback that y'all were giving me that most of y'all remember the basics of this, so that's good. All right, let's do another one of this type. Let's look at number 5. I'll move a little bit faster on this one since we did this slow, deliberate one there. All right, so first off, make sure it's equal to 0. Is this equal to 0? It is not. So since it is not equal to 0, I need to make it so. So this x here needs to move over to this side, and it can be combined with this other x. So I can do minus x to cancel it out here, and then I can combine it with this other negative 8x, since those are like terms. So now we have 9x squared, and then negative 8x and a negative x can be combined. So negative 8x and a negative 1x would make negative 9x, and then minus 10 is equal to 0. So it's equal to 0. Next, we're going to find the GCD. So what's the GCD between 9, 9, and 10? Biggest number you can divide all of those things by. Yeah, just 1. Okay, so the GCD would just be a 1 in this case. Now, the GCD is 1, which means technically you divide these by 1, right? But if you divide by 1, it's just going to be the same thing. So it's just going to be, again, 9x squared minus 9x minus 10. Dividing by 1 won't change it. It'll just stay the same in this case. Now, how many terms are there? Three terms. So there's a 3-term, we're going to do the 3-term method of factoring, which is identifying A, B, and C, making our number puzzle. So in the top left corner, A times C would be 9 times negative 10, which is negative 90. In the top right corner, my B value would be negative 9. Now, again, we need two numbers that multiply to make negative 90 and add to make negative 9. Now, this one's tough to do in your head. Okay, I didn't do this one immediately in my head either. It took me a few seconds to really test a couple numbers. That's totally fine, right? So to make negative 90, let's go through some options. There's 1 times negative 90. There's 2 times negative 45. There's 3 times negative 30. I don't think 4 works. And then you get to 6 times negative 15 eventually. And then I can stop because 6 and negative 15 also add to the negative 9. So here, the 6 and the negative 15 also add to the negative 9. So there's our number puzzle solution. All right, so now we're going to make 2 sets of parentheses. We're going to put an X in each. I'm going to fill it in with my number puzzle solution, so plus 6 and minus 15. Now, the step that is most commonly forgotten is, again, to do what? Divide by the A value. So make sure you're being very careful there. The A value is 9. So I do need to divide each of these by that A value of 9, which will change things in this case. Now, 6 divide 9, okay, it does reduce, right? And I showed you how to have Desmos help you with this. You can just do 6 divide 9 in Desmos. It'll reduce it for you. So if I do 6 divide 9, that actually reduces to x plus 2/3. 15 divide 9, if you type it in, also reduces. You can reduce by 3 to make 5/3. So I just reduced or simplified those fractions. Now, if you recall before the break, at this step, if you still have a fraction, what do you have to do next? Yeah, we called it bottoms up. So the bottom number, this bottom number will move up. And so this will make 3x plus 2. And then this bottom number will move up to make 3x minus 5. And then I put my GCD in front, which is 1. So my GCD was 1, so put that in front. And these are my factors. Okay, so I have factors. Finally, what do I do with factors to get solutions? What do I do with each of these? Okay, make them equal to 0. So the first one is 1. So if I just set 1 equal to 0, not only is that nonsense, it also doesn't have an x to solve, so that makes no solution. For the next one, 3x plus 2 equal to 0. Minus the 2 over to solve for x, minus the 2. So 3x equals negative 2. Divide the 3. So x equals negative 2/3. So then the next one, 3x minus 5 equal to 0. This one's pretty easy. Add the 5 and divide the 3. So then x would be 5/3. Would be that solution. So the solutions here are negative 2/3 and 5/3. All right, I'm going to do one more with you, but before I do that, I just want to make it very clear with factoring, like I'm sure I told you this before the break when we first started this, factoring is I think it is the most important skill in all of algebra. The reason I say that is because you will never escape it in any of your math classes, right? We will do factoring more than any other single skill in this class that I've ever taught you. You will do factoring more than any other single skill I teach you in pre-cal. You will do factoring more than any other skill I teach you in calculus. It never goes away. You got to make sure you're getting factoring down. You will see it over and over and over and over and over again for every math class from here on out. Okay, so make sure you're getting comfortable with factoring. Okay. All right, last one, number 7. Number 7. So first off, is it equal to 0? It is not. So I'm going to first take this negative 3x and move it over to here. So this will be add the 3x to cancel and move it to this side. Now, can 9x squared and 3x, are those like terms that I can combine or no? No. So this will be 9x squared plus 3x is equal to 0. So now GCD. Okay, so GCD is next. Now in this case, how many terms are there? Just 2 terms. Okay, so between the 2 terms, what's the biggest number I can divide them both by? Okay, 3. And in addition to that, they both have the variable x, so 3x would be my GCD. Because all of the terms have an x in it, then an x should also be included in the GCD. So now I divide both of these by that GCD of 3x. So divide by the GCD of 3x. Now 9x squared divide 3x would make 3x. 9 divided 3 makes 3. X squared, I have 2 x's. I divide one of them away. I've got 1x left. So 3x. And then plus 3x divide 3x would be 1. 3 divided 3 is 1. I have an x. I divide it away. No more x. So I divided out 3x. Now, how many terms are there? 2 terms. So if you had your flowchart out, you could look through the options for 2-term factoring. Okay? If you look through the options for 2-term factoring, you'll eventually see that this one has no square. So there's a type of factoring when there's no more square. What does that mean? You're done. Factoring is done. You put the GCD in front, and those are your factors. So these are by far the easiest ones to factor if you get them. Factoring is done. No more square, done. Factoring is done. Now these are factors. Again, we still need solutions, right? So to get the solutions, again, we would set each of them equal to 0. So we would set 3x equal to 0. So solve that for x by dividing by 3. So x would equal 0 is one of my solutions. And then if I set 3x plus 1 equal to 0, minus the 1, divide the 3, and x would equal negative 1/3. Will be my other solution. So these are the easiest ones that you're going to encounter, but you just don't really encounter them as often as you might want.